know about experts. So little is known about the San Remo Treaty that I'm considered an expert. But my text for today is taken from Luke 21, verses 23 to 24. It states, and this is Jesus talking, "There will be great distress in the land and wrath against this people. They will fall by the sword and will be taken as prisoners to all the nations. Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled." Here, Jesus, of course, was speaking about the imminent fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, when there was a massive slaughter on the lines of the Crusaders. And he was also talking about the worldwide scattering of Jewish people, what's called the Roman exile. Jesus was forecast that Jerusalem would be trampled up underfoot by the Gentiles until his second coming. And that's why Jerusalem and Israel are still being trampled today. Nations are telling Israel what to do with their own land and their own capital of 3,000 years. Jerusalem was a capital, while London, this great city, was just a Neolithic crossing point on the River Thames. Kerry is trying to manipulate Israel to do certain things in the upcoming peace negotiations with the Palestinian Arabs. But the most scandalous piece of Gentile trampling in the last 90-odd years, in my opinion, has been the airbrushing out of history of the irrevocable, or supposedly irrevocable, San Remo Treaty that too few know about. And if you don't know anything about it, just listen to what I've got to say. You've just got to remember a paragraph, that's all. Lord Curzon, the British Foreign Secretary in 1919, called it in its original Balfour Declaration form the Magna Carta of Zionists. I attended an Israel advocacy mission with honest reporting in Jerusalem, and I was shocked by the ignorance shown by Jews from all over the world who attended the course about the San Remo Treaty and the Israeli themselves. Now, one speaker at the mission during the week was Hagit Ofran from Peace Now, which is a Jewish movement assisting the Palestinians to stop the building of settlements in Judea and Samaria. But I made this lady blush bright red. After she'd given a spiel, I asked the lady, what did she know about the San Remo Treaty? And she gave me the Manuel answer from Fawlty Towers. I know nothing. I know nothing about the San Remo Treaty. Well, I retorted, well, you should do, as it gives Israel the right to settle Jews between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean Sea, provided there's no interference with existing Gentile communities. That's what I remember. That's what I want you to remember today. Israel has the right. The San Remo Treaty gives Israel the right to settle Jews between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, including Gaza, provided there's no interference within existing communities. Now, the Nazi mantra was repeat a big lie and people will believe it. And I think this is what's happening today. The liars are winning the propaganda battle to delegitimize Israel. Supporters of Israel's right to live in peace within secure borders are failing to proclaim this San Remo Treaty to an ignorant world. Successive Israeli governments should have blasted out the Judeo-Christian scriptures say that the Holy Land belongs to the Jews, so does the Quran, and so does the San Remo Treaty. The Israeli government brought out or got the Levy report, which says the same thing, but Netanyahu appears to have shelved it at the moment. I detect Kerry's influence there. And yes, you heard me right. Allah has promised Israel to the Jews. Muhammad, Israel's founder, says the Muslim God, Allah, assigned Israel to the Jews, and the Jews are the inheritors of Israel. I won't have time to amplify this, but I'll be doing a blog about it, which I'll give in more fully. Now, the backstory for San Remo begins with in the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. There's a whole host of people who, on reading the scriptures, and that's what happened to me. Unknown, I became an Israel supporter because I read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. So Israel firmly fixed on this game. Wesley said people couldn't miss it, but people are missing it because they discard in the Old Testament, as we heard earlier from Steve. Now, these people realised that the Jewish diaspora would one day return home to their ancient homeland. And they realised this, because of the persecution of the Jewish diaspora would drive them back. David Pawson reckons, he's done research which he claims shows that half of the people born in the last, or half of Jews born in the last 800 years have perished by murder and lynch mobs. Now, there's a big list of Zionists throughout history. I'm talking about England. I mean, I was so proud, what England did, in the 17th, 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries. And then we did an about turn and did the dirty on Israel. But the Puritan theologian John Owen, Oliver Cromwell, the Wesley brothers, William Wilberforce, Robert Merritt McShane, hymnwriter Andrew Bonner, Bishop J.C. Ryle, which is from my hometown of Macclesfield, and Charles Haddon Spurgeon were all Zionists. I've got mixed up here, but there we go. And this led to Lord Palmerston in the 1840s. He asked the crumbling Ottoman Empire to allow Jews back in the homeland. It didn't succeed at the time, but thereafter a number of parliamentarians were convinced about Israel being reconstituted. Winston Churchill said the same thing in 1908. Now, you know about the Balfour Declaration. This was named after Arthur Balfour. He was Prime Minister between 1902 and 1905, but he's best known as his action as Foreign Secretary in 1917 when he promised Jews a national home in Palestine. Thereafter it became known as the Balfour Declaration. And within weeks, the British and Commonwealth forces had liberated Palestine from Turkish rule. Now, following the end of the First World War, in which the Ottoman Empire had sided with Germany, the Allies decided that territories previously administered by the Turks should become sovereign nations. In other words, Britain, wasn't to colonise Israel. And we come to the San Remo conference. This was held in the Italian Riviera in April 1920, when the post-war Allied Supreme Council was held. Lloyd George, as Prime Minister of Britain, attended. So did the Prime Ministers of France, Italy, and there was a Japanese ambassador, and the USA was present with an observer status. Now, the outcome was the granting by the League of Nations to Britain of the mandate for Palestine. The mandate set out how the Holy Land was to be settled by Jews until they could form a viable nation. So this was the first time in history Palestine became a legal entity and not just a geographical area. The Balfour Declaration was incorporated into international law, and sovereignty over Palestine was vested in the Jewish people. The Jews became the national beneficiary based on self-determination, even though most Jews had not returned to the Holy Land. So this treaty recognised that Jews were the true indigenous people of the Holy Land. And this treaty cannot be revoked. You hear about United Nations resolutions or International Court of Justice. It means nothing. Nothing can trump a treaty. And this treaty is still valid in international law. It was included in the Treaty of Sevres that sorted out territorial and other matters relating to the Great War and became operational as an international law in September 1923. It's also part of the United States law. And it wasn't just the Jews who were given sovereignty over parts of Middle East, or whatever you want to call it. The Arabs gained rights in Lebanon, Syria, and Mesopotamia, which is now called Iraq. So this is where the Jewish state gets its legitimacy from. It's from the San Remo Treaty. And all 51 nations belonging to the League of Nations at the time, in 1922, when they voted for this, they all voted in favour. And it mustn't be forgotten that Palestine was split in two by Winston Churchill. 78% of the old Palestine became Transjordan, which then promptly banned all Jews. But they got the lion's share of the land, and even until the League of Nations finished, it referred to the territory as the Transjordan province of Palestine, right until its last meeting in 1946. And Transjordan, Britain also had the mandate for Transjordan, and it gained its independence from Britain. It became responsible for conducting its own affairs in 1946. Now, I hail the European Coalition of Israel for championing the San Remo Treaty. This is where I got my information from in the first place, and they're the only organisation that are really pushing this at European Union level, at the United Nations level. They've been out to Japan to tell her. The Japanese didn't know they were involved in the San Remo Treaty, but the European Coalition for Israel has made them aware. And they're taking the message to governments around the world. And in April 1920, they hired the same villa as the San Remo conference was originally held in 1920 to proclaim, this forgotten treaty, this forgotten but still internationally binding treaty. And it's published a booklet called 90 Years On, and it's written by former Christian Friends of Israel director Roy Thurley, which is available on the internet. Don't pay £2 for the booklet, get it off the internet. 90 Years On, Roy Thurley, you can get it. But he's done much, and he's spreading the message around the churches. Now, Roy also sat on an international committee of the European Coalition for Israel. They met for 6 months, and they were assisted by a top international lawyer. And that committee concluded that the San Remo Treaty remains valid and gives Israel the right to settle Jews between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean Sea. All of the claims regarding this territory are bogus. So Israel are not the occupiers, they are legal inheritors of land by international.
Thank you. That was really excellent.